have told this story 3 times in full. The first time was to a detective who kept stopping me to pin down details I could not pin down myself. He wanted sequence, order, clean edges. He wanted to know where my sister was standing when she opened the door, which hand the man used, what brand of dish soap was on my kitchen counter, whether I was sure he smiled. I understood why he needed those things, but understanding it did not make me able to give them. The second time was to a psychiatrist at the rehabilitation hospital who asked me to keep my eyes open when I talked. She said my mind had turned the whole stretch of time into one sealed room, and if I wanted to live outside it, I had to describe it plainly. No dramatics, no skipping over the part where I thought about dying and decided that would be easier. No jumping ahead to the window, the police, the hospital, the part everyone else seemed to want, because it meant the story had an end. The third time was for a civil deposition, and it was the worst because by then I had memorized the facts people considered important and learned how to arrange them in a way that sounded stable. The lawyers liked that version. It was organized. It had enough pain in it to seem honest, but not so much that they had to stop the recording. This is not that version. This is the closest I can get to what it actually felt like. My sister was the one who opened the door. Her name was Nina. She was younger than me by 4 years and had been staying with me for a few weeks because her apartment had a leak that turned one wall black with mold. She worked from home and said she could work anywhere. But the truth was she liked being around people, and I had just ended a long relationship and was pretending I preferred the house quiet. We were both lying to each other in gentle ways. It was one of the last normal things between us. The day itself did not feel marked in any way. There was no storm, no power outage, no strange car parked across the street. Nothing was off enough that it would sound like a warning if I said it out loud now. We had coffee in the kitchen and argued about whether a bag of spinach was still good. Nina always ate things a day or 2 past what I would. She said people wasted too much food because they were scared of everything. I said she had the stomach lining of a wild dog. She told me I was becoming old before my time. We laughed. I remember that clearly because for a long time I hated myself for remembering that better than some other things. She was wearing gray leggings and one of my sweatshirts, the green one with a university logo. Neither of us had any connection to, because I got it at a thrift store. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she kept tucking it behind one ear while she looked at her laptop on the counter. The doorbell rang. It was nothing unusual. People rang my doorbell all the time. Deliveries got left at the wrong house. Neighbors borrowed tools. A man from a roofing company had come by 2 days earlier and left a flyer tucked into the frame. Nina glanced at me and I shrugged. I was rinsing out a mug. She was closer, so she went. That is the last thing in my life that happened for an ordinary reason. I heard the front door open. I heard a man say something I could not make out. His voice was level, almost polite. Nina started to answer him. Then there was a sound so sharp and loud that for a second I did not understand what it was, because it did not belong in a house. It filled the hall and kitchen and seemed to flatten everything else. My first thought was not gunshot. It was some stupid domestic thought. Something like the shelf in the coat closet had collapsed. Then Nina hit the floor. I did not see the bullet hit her. I saw the result a fraction later when I turned toward the doorway and caught the side of her body dropping out of view. Her legs folded wrong, There was a wet impact against the wall. One of her slippers came off. The mug slipped from my hand into the sink and cracked. I remember the tiny extra noise of that almost as clearly as the gunshot, which makes me feel sick in a way I cannot explain. A man stepped over her and into my house. He was not wearing a mask. He was not dressed in black like someone in a movie who wants to look like a threat. He wore dark jeans, boots, a plain jacket, and a baseball cap. Average height, solid build, white. Somewhere in his 30s or 40s. The sort of face that can be standing right in front of you and still feel generic later. His expression was not excited, not angry. It was the face of someone entering the wrong conference room and realizing he still had a task to do in there. He shut the front door behind him. I backed away from the kitchen entrance without deciding to. My body had already begun doing things without asking me. He looked toward the sink, toward me, and I think if I had frozen right there, he would have shot me too. Maybe not. I will never know. The detective told me it probably saved my life that I moved before he had fully oriented himself. That sounds like a compliment, but it was just panic. There is a narrow door in the hallway off the kitchen that leads to the attic through a folding ladder. It is not a full attic, not the kind people convert into bedrooms. It is a hot, cramped space full of insulation, old paint cans, Christmas boxes, and the suitcase my mother used in the 80s. You cannot stand in most of it. It is a place for objects, not people. I ran there because it was the only place close enough. He said, "Don't." He did not raise his voice. That made it worse. I grabbed the cord, yanked the ladder down so hard, one hinge banged the wall, and climbed before it had fully settled. I remember my bare feet slipping on the rungs because I had kicked off my shoes in the kitchen. I remember hearing him in the hallway behind me, not running, just moving at a steady pace. I remember the air in the attic hitting my face, dry and stale and thick with dust. I pulled myself up and crawled into the dark. I should have pulled the ladder back up. People have asked me that. The answer is simple. I was not thinking. Also, the ladder did not fold back by itself, and I was already on my stomach, clawing forward into insulation and storage bins, shaking so hard my arms would barely hold me. My mind had narrowed to one command only: get farther. The attic smelled like old wood and heated fiberglass. A weak strip of light came up through the open hatch from the hallway below. There was another thin line from the vent near the back where the roof angled lowest. I shoved myself behind stacked plastic tubs and an old rolled rug, trying to make my body smaller than it was. Then I heard him stop below the opening. I knew he could see the ladder. I knew he knew where I had gone. What I did not know yet was that he was in no hurry. He waited there for a moment. I could hear his breathing better than mine, because I was holding mine without meaning to. Then he climbed the first few rungs. The wood creaked under his weight. I pressed one hand over my mouth so hard I bit my palm. I thought he would come all the way up, part the bins, put the gun against my face. I was certain of it. Every second stretched until I felt physically ill. But he stopped. Just a few steps up, close enough to look in. He said, "I'm going to be in the house for a while." That was all. Then he went back down. I stayed there listening to the ladder settle after his weight left it. I stayed until my lungs burned because I still believed he might be at the opening waiting for me to make some sound that would help him place me. Finally, I breathed in through my nose, shallow and hot. The dust made me cough, and I had to force it back into my chest with both hands clamped over my mouth. I could not see Nina from where I was. That came later, in imagination, and then in dreams. At the time, there was only the fact that she was down there and not moving, and I was up here and alive. I have spent whole nights thinking about that separation. There was a phone in my pocket for maybe the first 2 or 3 seconds after I reached the attic. Then there was not. It must have slipped out while I climbed or crawled. I did not realize it until I needed it, and reached for it, and found nothing. The panic of that discovery came in waves over the next hours, again and again, as if my body could not accept the loss all at once. At first, I still believed I would get another chance quickly. He would leave. A neighbor would hear something. Nina's body would be found. I would come down and call for help. My mind was still built around a normal scale of danger, where terrible things happen fast and then end. What I did not understand was that he had no intention of ending anything quickly. The first stretch of time was sound. That is how I measured him. Not by clocks, because there was no way to see one from where I lay, and not by light, because the attic held the same dim gray for most of the day. I measured him by footsteps, cabinet doors, drawers opening, the refrigerator seal peeling free, the faucet running, the television turning on in the living room. At some point, music played low enough that I could feel more than hear it through the ceiling joists. He walked through the house as if he lived there. No stomping, no shouted threats, no frantic overturning of furniture. He moved slowly, deliberately, the scrape of a chair across hardwood, a closet door opening and closing, the washing machine lid lifted and dropped, something glass set carefully on a counter. He was not searching the way desperate people search. He was taking inventory. The police later told me that crimes like this are usually fast. Forced entry, assault, theft, panic, exit. They said the length of time made it atypical. They said atypical as if it were an interesting weather pattern. At one point, I heard him drag Nina's body. That was when my bladder let go. I had held still through everything else, but that sound undid me because there was no mistaking it. Flesh and fabric moving over floorboards. A pause when her shoulder or head caught on something, then another pull. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was work. I knew then that she was dead, if some sick part of me had not already known. A living person would have made noise. A living person would have been spoken to. There would have been urgency. Instead, there was only the steady practical effort of moving weight from one room to another. I lay in my own urine, freezing even though the attic was warm, and tried not to think in words. You can only keep that up for so long. Eventually, thought comes back. Not because you are ready for it, because the mind hates emptiness. I thought about whether he had seen my face. I thought about whether he had parked in front of the house or down the street. I thought about the neighbors on either side and what room of their houses was nearest mine, and whether anyone would hear if I screamed. I thought about Nina's laptop open on the counter with her work tabs still there. I thought about the dog I did not own, the husband I did not have, the alarm system I kept meaning to install. I thought about every small adult decision I had delayed, because nothing bad had happened yet. The opening to the attic was maybe 12 feet from where I hid, but it felt like another world. If I moved even a little, Insulation whispered under me. The sound seemed enormous. I tried shifting only when I heard him moving downstairs, timing the noise of my body to the noise of his. But even that became dangerous because I started to imagine patterns where there were none. Every quiet stretch felt like a trap. The first time he spoke again, it was on the phone. I could not hear the other side, only him. He did not sound breathless or strained. He sounded mildly occupied. "No," he said. "I'm still here." A pause. "No, it's fine." Another pause. Then, "I know." He laughed softly at something. Not warm, not cold either. The kind of laugh people use in waiting rooms and elevators so the other person knows the conversation is continuing. Then he said, "I'll handle it." The call ended. For years afterward, I tried to make that phone call mean something specific. An accomplice, a wife, a friend, someone who knew what he was doing and accepted it. It may have been, or it may have been nothing to do with me. Wrong number, spam, work. There is no bottom to that kind of guessing. The truth is, I do not know. The smell of food started sometime after that. I noticed it before I understood it. Something warm, oily, normal. Onion first, then garlic, then meat. Browning meat in a pan. I had to clamp my mouth shut again because the human mind is badly made. And one of the first things mine did while my sister lay dead somewhere below me was recognize the smell of dinner and remember hunger. He cooked in my kitchen. Not reheated something. Cooked. Opened cabinets. Took out pans. Cut things on the board I kept by the stove. Used oil, salt, pepper, maybe dried herbs. There was the rhythm of someone who knows how to move around a kitchen without checking every drawer twice. The pan hissed, and after a while I heard the clink of utensils against a plate. I cried then, but silently, and I think it was less about Nina than about the obscenity of hearing that in my own house. That ordinary domestic noise after what he had done. It made the murder feel small to him, incidental. One task completed before another. He took a plate into the living room. I could tell by the shifting direction of the footfalls and then the sound of the television coming up louder. A man's voice from some game show or talk show. Applause, laughter, a commercial with bright music. I do not know what he watched. I only know he sat there long enough that I heard cutlery on ceramic, then the slight hollow thump of a glass being set on a table. Then at one point his chair or the couch springs adjusting under him. He was eating while I lay above him in dust and piss with my dead sister somewhere nearby. People use the word unreal for moments like that, but that is not accurate. It was too real. That was the problem. Nothing in it had the softness of nightmare. Each sound arrived hard and ordinary, and impossible to argue with. Night came slowly in the attic. The line of light from the vent thinned, then disappeared, and the house below changed tone. Hardwood noises sharpened. The television became the main source of life. Once, much later, I heard water running for a long time and realized he was showering. Not because there was anything especially clean or dirty about him, simply because my house had a shower and he wanted one. I could smell my shampoo afterward. That detail has stayed in my throat more stubbornly than the blood, more than the gunshot. My shampoo. My towel, maybe. My bathroom mirror fogging while he stood in the steam. I have never again been able to keep toiletries in a bathroom without feeling briefly that I am leaving pieces of myself arranged for a stranger. At some point during the night, I made my first plan. It was a stupid plan, but I was still in the stage where planning felt like control. I would wait until he slept. Houses sound different when someone sleeps in them. You can feel it. A settled quiet. I would come down the ladder, get to the front door, and run to the McCarthy's place across the street. They were older, always home early, always watching television with the volume too high. I had borrowed sugar from Mrs. McCarthy a week earlier. If I got to their porch and hammered on the door, they would let me in. The flaw in the plan was that I did not know where he was. Another flaw was that every floorboard in the hallway outside the attic had its own voice, and I knew them all. Another was that I had no idea whether he slept at all. Still, I held on to it. You need something in a crawl space besides fear, or your mind starts opening in the wrong direction. I must have drifted in and out, not sleep exactly, but the body failing in pieces. Every time I jerked back to full awareness, I had the same sequence of thoughts. Nina is dead. He is downstairs. Stay still. The next morning I knew it was morning because light returned to the vent and because I heard birds outside, faint through the roof. My back had become one hard burning line. My left foot had gone numb. My throat felt scraped raw from dust and dehydration. I licked condensation from a cold metal pipe near the eaves, which makes me sound feral, but was no more degrading than anything else about that day. He was still there, not just there. Comfortable. Cabinets again. Coffee grinder. The kettle. A drawer opening where the tea bags were kept. He had learned the house enough by then to move with fewer pauses. I listened to him using my things as if they had always been his. The television went on again. So did a vacuum cleaner later, which I did not understand at first. Then I realized he was cleaning. That is one of the parts people have the hardest time hearing. They expect ransacking because ransacking fits. They expect smashed frames, dumped jewelry boxes, slashed cushions. There was some of that, later, but not in the way you would imagine. He did go through my things, but carefully, and when he made disorder, he often corrected it afterward. He folded a blanket. He put dishes in the sink. He changed the trash bag in the kitchen. He made my bed. I did not know that last one until much later. The detective told me first, and then I saw the photographs they should never have shown me. My comforter pulled smooth, pillows arranged, my bedroom neat apart from the drawers that had been opened and examined, my underwear stacked on the floor in small piles by color, as if he had been learning a system. That is what it was, learning. He read me through my possessions. He looked at receipts, bills, prescription bottles. He opened the box under my bed with cards from my mother and ex-boyfriend, and sat with them long enough that I knew he was reading. He went through the bathroom cabinet and the hall closet and the pantry. Once I heard pages turning for so long I thought he had found a book. Later I understood it was my planner. I had written appointments, grocery reminders, stupid little notes to myself. Pick up dry cleaning, call dentist, Nina here through Thursday. He had all of that. The shape of my weeks, the texture of what I forgot. That second day is the one I returned to most often, because it was when fear changed form. At first he had been a direct danger, an immediate one. A man with a gun in my house. Then, as the hours accumulated, he became something more complete and much harder to think about. The threat stopped being the moment he might find me. and became the fact that he was constructing a relationship to me, while I lay there unable to interrupt it. He already knew where I was. I did not understand that fully yet, but some part of me had started to feel it. Why had he not left? Why had he not climbed up and shot me? Why remain through a night and into another day unless the remaining itself mattered? The answer was there, but I could not look at it straight on. By what I later counted as maybe the 19th hour, I stopped believing he was searching. There is a sound people make when they are trying to locate someone. Repeated doors, repeated footsteps, circles of frustration. He had none of that. He moved through the house with the calm of a man tending a place. Sometimes he came to the hallway beneath the attic hatch and stood there for a while. I could tell because the air changed. Floors carry presence. Then he would walk away again. Once he said, not loudly, "You should drink something." My entire body locked. I do not know if he was talking to me, to himself, to the room. I did not answer. I did not move. A while later he said, "It gets hot up there." Then silence. That was when the truth landed all the way. He was not trying to flush me out. Not even really trying to frighten me, though of course he was. He was creating a situation in which every minute upstairs would become harder to survive than the risk of coming down. Thirst, cramping, numbness, the need to urinate again, the dust, the hunger, the not knowing whether he had left, whether anyone would ever come, whether Nina's body was still in the hall or hidden somewhere else. He was patient because patience was the weapon. He knew I was there from the first minute. Maybe he had seen where I went. Maybe the open hatch was enough. Maybe there were only so many places a woman could disappear in that house. It did not matter. He knew, and he had decided to wait. There are people who do bad things in a rush of appetite or panic, and then there are people who can sit inside a bad thing and make a home of it. That was him. I started imagining coming down just to end the waiting. I need to say that plainly because people want survivors to have a clean, fierce instinct toward life. Sometimes I did. Sometimes all I wanted was for the uncertainty to stop, even if the next thing was my death. The body does not worship survival in a noble way. It bargains. It looks for the fastest exit from pain. I did not come down because Nina kept me up there. Not heroically. Not as a mission. Just with the brute fact that he had shot her in the head as casually as another man might close an umbrella. If I gave him my body, there was no reason to believe anything would become better or shorter or kinder. The only mercy available was delay, and I took it. By then I had found a framing nail in the attic and wrapped my hand around it like it meant something. I also found a small flashlight with dead batteries and one half-empty bottle of wood glue. These became my inventory of hope. At one point I heard him in my bedroom speaking in a low voice. For a moment I thought he had called someone again. Then I realized he was reading aloud from something. I could not make out every word, just fragments. My name. Nina's name. My old address from before the house. He had found documents. He was practicing me. That afternoon, the heat in the attic turned thick and almost wet. I began to drift into small, involuntary dreams. In one of them, Nina was below me cooking, and I had to choose whether to go down and tell her what had happened. In another, I was already in the hospital trying to explain to a nurse that I could not find my left shoe. Both of these sounds absurd. They did not feel absurd at the time. They felt like my brain liquefying under stress. I heard the back door open once and nearly cried with relief. Then footsteps outside, then back in. He had only gone out to the yard, maybe to smoke, maybe to check the perimeter, maybe to stand in the sun while I dehydrated above him. I thought about jumping from the attic vent to the side yard. I even dragged myself close enough to inspect it. The vent was small, nailed in place, and behind it was a drop that would have broken something even if I could get through. I laughed soundlessly at my own stupidity and then had to stuff my fist into my mouth because the laugh wanted to turn into sobbing. Late in that second day, I began trying to recover my phone in my head. Not physically, mentally. I retraced the climb. Pocket, ladder, crawl. I could picture my phone case, blue with a cracked corner. It had probably fallen near the attic opening, maybe onto the hallway floor below. If it had landed silently under a table or against the wall, he might not have noticed it. If he did notice, he might have taken it. If he took it, he might still have left it somewhere in the house. That possibility became my second plan. Not escape. Phone. If I could get to it, if I could call quietly, if I could keep him away for the length of one conversation, maybe there would be an end that did not involve me walking willingly into his hands. The problem was getting down, and the larger problem was getting back somewhere hidden if he heard me. But once a plan starts in you, it grows around everything. I began saving scraps of strength for it. Night came again. He ate again. Different smells this time. Tomato sauce. Something baked. He opened a bottle of wine from the rack I kept for guests and bad Tuesdays. I heard the cork work free. Glass touching glass, though he was alone. Maybe he poured it into a second glass, just because the set looked nicer. That thought made me physically nauseous. At some point he turned on music instead of television. Old songs. Nothing sinister. Familiar things you hear in grocery stores and at dentists. The kind of music that insists ordinary life is still happening. I lay there and understood in a way I had not before that evil is not a special atmosphere. It does not arrive with the right soundtrack. It can wear the whole plain skin of a Tuesday evening. Sometime in the dark, I heard him moving something heavy in the living room. Later, I learned it was a chair positioned where he could see both the front hall and the stairs without sitting directly beneath the attic opening. He had arranged the house around my eventual descent. By then, my body was failing in little ways. My lips were split. My calves cramped so violently I almost cried out. I had to keep shifting the pressure on my hips and ribs or lose feeling. Every motion sent prickling pain through my limbs. I started thinking in loops. Phone, water, Nina, quiet, phone, water, quiet. The thing people like least when I tell this part is that there were periods where he and I almost seemed to coexist. He would move downstairs. I would adjust upstairs. He would speak a sentence into the house. I would remain silent. He would cook, clean, watch television, use the bathroom, maybe sleep. I would listen, count breaths, swallow dust. This went on long enough that the terror ceased to spike and instead soaked into everything. I was not always actively panicking by then. Often I was simply enduring. That may sound less frightening, but it was worse. Panic is a storm. Endurance is weather. Near what I later counted as the 24th hour, I heard him very close beneath me again. He said, You can come down. I won't shoot you. The words entered me like cold water, not because I believed him, because the sentence itself proved how settled he was. He was negotiating now. He had all the time in the world. After a while, he added, "You need a doctor." Then, after another long pause, "Your sister did not suffer." That was the first time he had mentioned her. I bit down on my wrist so hard I left marks for days. If I had made any sound then, any at all, I think I would be dead. The house went quiet for so long afterward that I almost convinced myself he had finally left. Then the toilet flushed. Hope is a cruel organ. It grows back badly every time. The chance came because my body made the decision before my mind could refuse it. I had to urinate again, and there was almost nothing left in me. I also knew if I stayed where I was much longer, I might black out for good. The line between caution and surrender had started to blur. That frightened me more than him. I did not trust my own judgment anymore. I waited until I heard the television in the living room and what sounded like him opening a window there. Outside, noise crept in. Distant traffic, a dog, someone mowing. That gave me cover. I inched toward the opening. Each movement hurt. My joints had gone rigid from being folded under me so long. Pins and needles shot through my legs. I moved the bins a fraction at a time, wincing at every scrape. The attic hatch glowed faintly below. The ladder was still down. That is another detail that tells you everything about him. He had left me a way out. I flattened at the edge and listened. Television. Low voices. A commercial. Nothing in the hall. I lowered one foot to the top rung and almost fell because my leg shook so badly. I clung there, head spinning, waiting for the house to react. It did not. Another rung. Another. I could see the hallway floor now. Light from the living room reached part way. There was a dark stain on the wall where Nina had fallen. The slipper was still there. No body. Something inside me screamed soundlessly at that absence. I came down the rest of the ladder as slowly as I could and crouched under the opening, using the narrow strip of wall as cover. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach beneath the deeper smells of cooking and old blood. My phone was not visible. I looked toward the front hall, toward the kitchen, toward the small table where I dropped mail and keys. Every normal object looked staged. Bowl, lamp, framed photo. The house had the fixed, over-aware quality places get after violence, as if they are waiting to be interpreted. The television laughed in the living room. I crawled toward the kitchen first because that had been where I lost it. My limbs barely worked. I had to keep stopping because dizziness washed black over my vision whenever I moved too fast. Under the table, by the baseboards, under the radiator cover, nothing. I found the broken mug in the sink, still there in white shards. The kitchen was mostly clean, counter wiped, pan drying by the stove, a pot soaking, my coffee canister out, a cutting board with knife marks and one tiny dried piece of onion skin. It looked like someone had been house-sitting and was a little too comfortable. I heard movement in the living room and froze so hard my teeth clicked. The movement stopped. Then the television volume went up one notch. He knew. That is the moment I mean. When I say by hour 19, I realized he was waiting. The full bodily knowledge of it came there in the kitchen, crawling through the remains of his meal. while he adjusted the volume to tell me he was aware of my position and still not rushing me. I wanted to bolt for the back door. Instead, I kept low and searched. I found my phone finally under the lower kitchen cabinet near the toe kick, half hidden by shadow and dust. It must have skidded there when it fell from my pocket. The screen was cracked worse than before, but when I pressed the side button, it lit. Battery low. I nearly sobbed. No service at first, then 1 bar, then none, then 1 again. I pressed the emergency call option with a hand that would not stop shaking. The dispatcher answered so quickly it shocked me. For a second, no words came out. Then I whispered my address, whispered there was a man in the house. My sister had been shot. I was hiding in the kitchen. The dispatcher kept telling me to speak louder. I could not. I was sure he would hear. From the living room, the television went silent. He had muted it. The dispatcher was asking if the intruder had a weapon. I said yes. I said, please hurry. I said he killed my sister. Then the kitchen doorway darkened. He was standing there with the gun lowered at his side. There are moments when the body gives up pretending to you. Mine knew before my mind did that I had run out of room. He looked at the phone in my hand, then at me. His face did not change much. If anything, he seemed disappointed in a mild, administrative way. You shouldn't have done that, he said. The dispatcher was still speaking from the phone. Tinny, urgent, distant. He crossed the kitchen before I could move, and I tried to rise, slipping on my own bad legs, and swung the framing nail at him. It scratched his cheek, or maybe just hit his jacket. He took the phone from my hand and slammed it against the counter until it broke apart. Then he hit me behind the ear with the gun. I went down on the tile. I was conscious. I wish I had not been. He rolled me onto my stomach and pulled my arms behind me. I fought because fighting is an animal thing, and because it delayed comprehension. He was much stronger. He used something from the junk drawer, extension cord, I think, or appliance cord, to tie my wrists, then my ankles. Then he pulled me by the bound ankles across the floor and down the hallway. I remember the side of my face sliding over grout, wood, the lip between rooms. I remember the smell of bleach stronger now. I remember seeing the smear on the wall where Nina's blood had been partly cleaned, and realizing with absolute clarity that he had been tidying around her death. He dragged me into the dining room and tied me to one of the heavy chairs. Wrists lashed behind the back slats, ankles to the front legs, torso pinned with another cord or rope around my ribs. I was so weak by then that once I was upright, the room kept tipping in and out like a ship. He crouched in front of me. Up close, he looked even more ordinary. Stubble, pale eyelashes, a small scar near his mouth. There was a line of blood from where I had caught him. That was the only visible sign of struggle between us, and seeing it filled me with a hopeless, ugly satisfaction. He said, "The police will come. It won't be in time." No rage, no grand speech, just information. I asked where Nina was. He looked at me for a second as if deciding whether I had earned an answer. "In the guest room," he said. Then he stood and left. I screamed then, not words, just sound. It tore my throat open. I thought maybe I could force the neighbors to hear. Maybe the dispatcher had gotten enough. Maybe sirens were already on the way, and I could anchor them to the house with noise. He came back immediately and shoved a dish towel into my mouth so deep I gagged. He tied another strip of fabric around my head to hold it there. Then he stepped back and watched me choke around it until my body found a way to breathe. It is humiliating how quickly a body adapts to degradation when it has no choice. He left again. I do not know what he was doing for the next span of time. I heard drawers, water, metal. Maybe he was collecting things. Maybe cleaning. Maybe making sure he had a route out. I have replayed those sounds so often they have lost edges. What is sharp is when he returned carrying a hacksaw. Not a huge one. Not theatrical. A practical tool from my own garage. I started making noises into the towel before he reached me. My whole body tried to pull backward through the chair. He set the saw on the table and moved around me calmly, checking the cords, adjusting the chair's angle. He was breathing a little harder now, not from excitement, I think, but from the physical preparation of what he was about to do. He took the gag out. I begged him. Of course I did. I begged him in every way people imagined they would never do. I told him he could take whatever he wanted. I told him I would not look at him. I told him I would say it was someone else. I told him there was cash in the freezer, which was a lie. I told him I was sorry for calling. I told him my parents would pay him. I said my sister's name. I said please over and over until the word lost shape. He listened the way a mechanic might listen to an engine he has already diagnosed. Then he said, "I can't leave you intact." The sentence was so strange, so dry, that for a moment it failed to connect with the saw. He did not start with my arm because the angle was wrong. He untied my left ankle from the chair leg, dragged another chair over, and laid my leg across it at the knee. When I kicked, he hit me once across the face. Stars burst white. I tasted blood. Then he strapped the thigh and lower leg down with belts from my closet. I remember recognizing one of them. Brown leather. I had bought it for work clothes. The first cut was above the knee. People ask whether pain like that is as bad as you imagine. It is worse because imagination gives pain a clean center. Real pain is filthy. It has sound and heat and pressure and disbelief all mixed together. It is knowing exactly what is happening and also refusing it at the same time. It is your own voice coming from somewhere not fully under your control. He sawed through skin and muscle with steady force. Not skilled, not clumsy, just committed. The chair shook. Blood ran down the rung and onto the floor. I thrashed until the bindings cut into my wrists and ribs. My scream changed pitch so many times it did not feel human by the end. At some point I vomited onto my chest. At some point he paused to reposition the leg because the angle made his work harder. At some point I thought, very distinctly, this is how animals die on metal tables. When he reached bone, the sound changed. That is the part I still hear unexpectedly. Not in nightmares, in ordinary life. When someone saws a branch, when a restaurant kitchen drops a tray. Bone has a dry, resistant note to it that the body recognizes even when the mind wants to leave. I did leave, partly. Not consciousness entirely, but something floated loose. The room narrowed to patches, his forearm moving, dust in the air, sunlight from the dining room window, a framed print on the wall hanging slightly crooked because Nina had bumped it the week before and said she would fix it. Then the pain surged back hard enough to restore me. When the leg finally came free, I nearly passed out from relief, before the relief had time to reveal itself as blood loss. He set the severed part on the floor beside the chair, as if placing down a grocery bag. I looked at it. I wish I had not. I wish my mind had protected me there. But the body is drawn to its own wreckage. He wrapped something around the stump. Not properly. Not to save me long term. Just tight enough to slow the bleeding so I would remain conscious. Then he moved to my left arm. I told him he had done enough. I said I would die anyway. I said the police were coming. He answered, "Yes, that is all." He pinned my arm along the table this time. I tried to curl away and the chair nearly tipped. He corrected it, irritated now for the first time, and bound my forearm down with another belt. I could not stop shaking. My vision kept dimming at the edges, then returning in horrible brightness. The arm was worse because I could see more of it. I watched the saw bite into my own flesh just above the elbow, and understood with a sick, detached precision that my body had become an object he was altering. There is a point at which the mind can no longer maintain ownership of what is happening. I felt that point break. I screamed for Nina then, which is not something I admit often because it sounds childish, and because she was dead in the guest room with a bullet in her head and could do nothing for me. But that is who I called for. My sister. The room smelled like blood and metal and shit because I had lost control of everything by then. The sound of the saw hitting bone on my arm was higher than on the leg. My fingers spasmed and opened and spasmed again. I remember the absurd detail of my wedding ring finger being bare because I was divorced and thinking, in one bright, insane flash, good, at least it won't catch. Then I heard sirens, very faint at first, maybe imagined, then real. He heard them too. He stopped and turned his head toward the front of the house. For the first time since entering my life, he seemed pressed by time. He pushed harder. I do not know if he finished the arm before they reached the house, or if it was hanging by tissue and skin. I know it was gone when I woke in the hospital, and I know the surgeon later told me there was almost nothing to work with. Whether he meant that anatomically or mercifully, I never asked. The sirens were close then doors, then shouting outside. He dropped the saw. He looked at me with an expression I still cannot decode. Not hatred, not satisfaction, more like calculation interrupted. I thought he would shoot me in the head and leave. Instead, he ran. Not to the hall, to the dining room window. He smashed a chair through the glass, cleared enough with his forearm to make a gap, and climbed out. I heard shouting grow louder immediately, someone yelling for him to stop. Then another crash from outside, maybe the fence. Then nothing coherent at all because the room tilted and collapsed inward. I remember one police officer entering with his gun raised and then lowering it so fast it looked like a mistake. I remember another kneeling near me saying something I could not understand. I remember trying to ask for Nina and producing only a wet grinding sound because my mouth was full of blood and towel fibers. Then I passed out. I woke in the hospital with my mother asleep in a chair and a machine breathing numbers beside me. My first knowledge was absence, not pain. Space, a wrongness at my left side so profound that pain came only after it. The body map remains for a while. You still feel the missing hand clenched. You still think you can flex the missing ankle. Then the mind catches up, and every catch-up is a fresh injury. My mother woke and made a sound I had never heard from an adult before. Not words, not sobbing exactly. A kind of deep animal break. I turned my head and saw the bandaged place where my arm ended, and then the raised sheet over where my leg did not continue, and I understood enough. Nina had died before the ambulance arrived. The intruder was gone. He had cut through the McCarthy's side yard, jumped their back fence, crossed into an undeveloped lot, and disappeared before the perimeter closed. Dogs lost the trail at the road. Cameras from nearby houses caught pieces of him, angles, clothing, nothing decisive enough. He had worn gloves except when he had not. He had left fingerprints in some places, but none that matched anyone in the system. The gun was never found. Neither was he. That is the part people call the bad ending. But it is not the only one. A bad ending is also waking up and realizing you survived a thing your sister did not. A bad ending is learning how many forms the word recovery can take when none of them mean restoration. A bad ending is a prosthetics specialist speaking to you in a bright, practical voice, while you stare at the clean-wrapped geometry of where your body used to continue. A bad ending is the first shower when you can no longer trust the feeling of water running over skin, because half your mind thinks of blood, bleach, steam, his hands using my shampoo. A bad ending is being told months later that the guest room had been straightened after he put Nina there. The blanket pulled up to her chest, a pillow placed under her head, as if courtesy had visited after murder. A bad ending is finding out he washed the dishes before mutilating you. People want me to say I am grateful to be alive. Sometimes I am. Often I am not. More often I am simply busy, learning straps and sockets and balance, learning how to reach with one hand, learning how to sleep through the phantom itch in a foot that does not exist, learning how to answer when strangers ask what happened, and clearly wish I would tell them about a car accident instead. The psychiatrist told me trauma does not keep time correctly. It folds. She was right. I live in a body that contains the attic and the dining room at all times. Some days they are distant. Some days I open a kitchen drawer and smell onion, or hear a television audience laugh, and I am back under insulation, thirsty beyond language, listening to a man make himself at home in my life. There are practical consequences nobody warns you about. Doors are heavy. Stairs are negotiations. Winter sidewalks become mathematics. Clothing is a different species of problem. Men look at you too long, either from pity or fascination or relief, that what happened happened to someone else. Women touch your shoulder and say you are strong when they mean they are frightened. My house was sold. My mother handled it because I could not bear photographs. She told me she had the dining room window replaced before listing it. I asked why, and she said because no one wants to buy a house with a boarded window. She meant well. The market does not pause for blood. I have not been back. The detectives still call sometimes, less often now. Usually it is to ask if I remember anything new. A phrase, a smell, an accent, a scar, a brand of shoe. As if memory were a drawer one can sort through more neatly with age. What actually happens is the opposite. The true things wear thin from handling, and the invented or misremembered things fatten around them. I know certain facts. He rang the bell. Nina opened the door. He shot her immediately. He came into my house and stayed. He cooked. He watched television. He cleaned. He learned me through my things. He knew where I was all along. He waited for my body to fail. When I called for help, he decided what parts of me I could keep. Everything else exists in a gray ring around those facts. People also ask whether I think he chose us specifically. I used to say no because the alternative was unbearable. Randomness is ugly but roomy. Specific attention is a cage. Now I do not answer. He read my planner. He looked at my photographs. He spoke my name aloud in my bedroom. He moved through the rooms as if he had imagined them already and was pleased to find them real. Whether he picked the house at random and adapted, or picked me first and came prepared, changes nothing material about what he did. But in the dark, the difference still matters to me. There are nights when I wake convinced he is standing somewhere nearby, not with rage, not with a weapon raised, just waiting with that impossible patience. On those nights I do not fear being killed as much as being studied. That was the deepest violation in the end. Not only the pain, not even only Nina. It was being known against my will by someone who had earned none of it. Watching him turn the private shape of my life into usable information. Favorite tea, shoe size, whether I kept spare batteries, the side of the bed I slept on, which towel I reached for after a shower, the things that make up a person when nobody is supposed to be looking. The newspapers called him a home invader, which is true and also too small. An invader enters and takes. He entered and remained. He occupied. He nested inside the fact of us. I have tried, in therapy, to imagine the version of events where the police arrive 10 minutes earlier and save my arm, or where Nina lets the bell ring, or where my phone stays in my pocket, or where I pull the attic ladder up, or where I run through the back door instead of hiding. These are all useless movies. None of them touch the world I actually inhabit. In this one, Nina is buried 2 towns over under a stone our mother chose because it looked plain and calm. In this one, my left sleeve is pinned or folded depending on the day. In this one, children stare, adults look away, and certain men become careful and overkind, as if trauma might be contagious through conversation. In this one, somewhere, unless he is dead from some unrelated thing in some unrelated place. There is a man who knows the layout of my first floor, the softness of my bath towels, the way my sister fell, the exact amount of pressure required to part bone. He is the only other person alive who experienced the full length of those 27 hours. I hate that. I hate that a piece of my life exists in him, carried whole and unpunished, while mine exists in fragments, interrupted by medication schedules and prosthetic fittings, and the sudden white flare of remembered sound. When the psychiatrist asked me what I feared most now, I thought she expected the simple answer. Doors, men, houses, night. But the real answer came out before I could improve it. I fear that he is still patient, that he did not jump through the dining room window in panic and vanish into chaos, but simply moved on when the conditions changed. That for him those hours were not a frenzy or a breakdown or even a peak, just a stretch of time passed in one house before another day somewhere else. I fear that he could stand behind a woman in line at a pharmacy and read the items in her basket with the same quiet interest. I fear that he could rent a room, mow a lawn, hold a door open, ask a cashier how her shift is going. I fear that he could still ring doorbells. When I say I survived, people hear triumph in it. What I mean is narrower. I remained alive long enough for medicine to intervene. That is not the same as winning. It is not even the same as being safe. There are mornings when I wake before dawn, and for one clean second I have forgotten my body. In that second, the room is only a room. Then memory returns from several directions at once. Nina is dead. My arm is gone. My leg is gone. He is missing. The world continued anyway. I do not scream anymore when the memory returns. I just lie there and take inventory, which is something he taught me without meaning to. Window, door, phone, lock, breath. Then the deeper inventory underneath it. Alive. 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 Not whole. Never whole. But alive long enough to know that sometimes the worst thing does not end when the police arrive. Sometimes it keeps living with you, patient as ever, learning the new layout.